WWE's work culture has not always been kind to everyone that works within it, and maybe that's just a byproduct of pro wrestling being so demanding in general. It really isn't surprising that an organization as big and as competitive as WWE is with all of entertainment has a history of challenging conditions for those that sacrifice so much for it. But what may shock you is the levels at which those challenges can get so negative and impact the lives of those within the company. You're probably aware of maybe the big tall tales or legitimate ones you've heard of wrestling's past with pills and alcohol and fights backstage, wild road stories, and various egregious acts. It isn't nearly as intense as it may have been in the past, but the allegations against Vince McMahon and others related to him within WWE once again remind us of how challenging this business can be, how some people can simply turn to the dark side and negative side of life in ways that we didn't expect. WWE as it stands naturally is also highly competitive, a non-stop machine of people trying to find their way to the top, emotionally invested in becoming the superstar they need to be on television while still being the person they are off television, sacrificing so much along the way so egos and other things are expected to blow up at some point and create situations that we're going to talk about right now. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. Let us know what you think of these various stories in the comments below. There has been countless stories of political backstabbing backstage, the wrestlers' court sessions which have wrestlers publicly humiliating each other and shaming each other in front of their peers for fun, I guess, internal policing of egos, bullying, and so much more. The sad reality is that there are some things we'll only know about publicly, and then some of these stories we do know about. There are a lot of reasons why WWE has become such a challenging workplace culture, and it has a lot to do with the overall rapid expansion of their business that they experienced over the span of a few decades that demanded a whole lot more of their superstars, crew, and beyond. As the famous rapper Notorious B.I.G. put it, more money, more problems. WWE mastermind Vince McMahon wasn't exactly humble in the rise of WWE as well. He defied his father's wishes to let the wrestling business in the United States remain a territorial regional one, with each overhead of a promotion running different parts of the country. And he chose to be a little bit more ruthless, trampling over the competition along the way and making a lot of enemies in the process. In the 1980s, with the rise of WWE, WWF at the time, Hulk Hogan was blazing a trail for the company beyond the New York area roots that they were known for, and found a legit threat on the road when they came to Kansas City. According to Hogan, who's known to exaggerate himself, Harley Race, widely considered one of the toughest men in the pro wrestling business and someone who deeply opposed WWE coming into his area, allegedly came to the arena drunk and lit the ring on fire. Yeah, even the ring crew has to deal with this madness. Hogan also claimed in a radio interview in the past that Race threatened to kill him that day. Yeah, years later, Hogan would face Race on national television for WWE. Wrestling is indeed a weird business. And that's just one example of the very stressful situations that WWE superstars and the crew find themselves dealing with. Batista, who's by far one of the most successful wrestlers of the 21st century, spoke to Men's Health about the work environment within WWE and summed up how taxing it was in his early days in the business. People didn't like me. I was doing something wrong. The company wasn't going to do anything with me, and they didn't know what to do with me, and they didn't know where I fit in. It was just a very toxic atmosphere. Wrestling is very competitive. It's very cutthroat. You're put in a position where you have to posture up all the time, and it's exhausting. That's coming from one of the most accomplished superstars of all time. It says a lot about the work culture within big-time pro wrestling. Vader, inarguably one of the biggest big men in the history of the business, came into WWE in the 90s with a lot of hype behind him and was considered to be the perfect person to dethrone the valiant babyface champion Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship. WWE boss Vince McMahon had a big money star in his hands, but he chose to side with Shawn Michaels, who was still a few years away from changing his life in a positive direction. 1990s Shawn Michaels was considered among some of the most difficult wrestlers politically to deal with, and he was known for those issues widely, something he himself has admitted to at some level. On top of this, there was apparently some bullying in their match at SummerSlam with Michaels, where Michaels apparently kicked Vader because of a missed spot in the match. He made Vader, a 6'5", 400-plus pound NFL veteran, be brought to an emotionally distraught state. Why did he do that? Because if Vader didn't hit a move or pull his hair too hard? Michaels chewed him out and reportedly threatened to have him fired from the company. Essentially destroyed Vader's trajectory. This essentially destroyed Vader's momentum within WWE and may have cost him a lot more money and success in the future. The politics, the stress, that is just one example of the intersection of mental stress and physical pain that are a part of being in the WWE. Sometimes these arduous situations are not just something that the contracted weekly televised talent, the superstars, have to deal with, but also these small part players that come in from time to time also have to endure. During a match on Monday Night Raw, an enhancement talent faced a botched move and it really aggravated Perry Saturn. He decided to take liberties and physically assault this person for real on television. And this was a big no-no, and WWE punished him by giving him, reportedly, the gimmick of a man who loves a mop. And somehow Perry Saturn made that work for himself. While some found it entertaining, it certainly put a big dent in his entire perception as a badass pro wrestler and made him more of a comedic mid-card guy. Is that what he wanted for his WWE career? Years later, outside of the WWE, Perry Saturn found himself saving a woman who was being assaulted and fought off two men only to get shot in the back of his neck. It led to an addiction to drugs that rendered him homeless for nearly 3 years. He was a part of a 2016 concussion lawsuit against WWE that was eventually dismissed, but he remains a shell of maybe the person we saw on television years ago and has lingering injuries from his times in the ring that have forced him to undergo neurological treatments. This is just one brutal example of the wear and tear that the wrestling industry takes on those that perform on it. An example of someone who gave their life to the business and on the other side of it, suffered. Another issue that has been more publicly revealed in recent years is the alleged crimes committed against women within pro wrestling culture. Trigger warning, because this next segment of the video involves references to SA and other disturbing details, we just want to let you know you can skip ahead to this time in the video. Ashley Massaro debuted for WWE in 2005. She would win the Raw Divas Search competition, but would leave the company in 2008. That former WWE chairman Vince McMahon sexually harassed her during her time in the company. In the affidavit released to Vice News by Massaro's lawyer, Tim Marchman, in these same legal documents, Massaro shared the awful experience of enduring an assault while overseas for WWE. While on the tour of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Afghanistan, Massaro told her colleagues on the tour she was suffering from a menstrual issue and wanted to see one of the Army's doctors while suffering from dehydration. She alleged that the man violently assaulted her and described the experience as a living nightmare, with no idea of how long it went on for. After making an abrupt return to the United States after this awful ordeal, reportedly, she told a doctor about the assault. The details she requested be kept secret, but that doctor then went on to inform WWE management, who called her in for a meeting along with other executives. Massaro was allegedly asked to recall the details of what happened in this meeting, and when she did, she was reportedly coldly told that her story wasn't in the best interest for WWE to come out publicly. Although WWE reportedly stated they weren't aware of this incident taking place or the meeting involving Vince McMahon, another WWE talent executive, John Laurinaitis, involved in the recent Vince McMahon allegations, dropped a conflicting statement in February 2024 revealing that higher-ups backstage were aware of the incident. Massaro sadly died of a reported suicide in 2019. There is no easy way to transition from such a serious topic to the less serious topics of backstage politics that pro wrestlers have to endure with the creative depiction of their characters. But it is the trials and tribulations of any performer, and it is one that we tend to hear more about. Diamond Dallas Page endured some of these conflicts. There was a very significant us versus them mentality in place during the Monday Night Wars period of the 1990s between WWE and their arch nemesis WCW. And as you probably know, WWE won that war of Monday nights and purchased the remnants of WCW in what was one of their biggest triumphs as a corporate wrestling monolith. That us versus them mentality never really left in some circumstances when some of the WCW talent under contracts made their way to WWE, and DDP was one of the biggest victims, reportedly, of this. He was given the unfortunate gimmick of the Stalker. Yes, the one who would stalk The Undertaker's real-life wife, Sarah. Something that was maybe doomed from the start. DDP was one of wrestling's biggest success stories, definitely one of the biggest out of WCW, and his potential jumping to WWE felt wasted because of, reportedly, hatred from the former rival promotion. Let's put him out there and make him look bad. That is what some people say was happening. It's no coincidence that most of the WCW stars found it hard to succeed in some way or another during this period in WWE. DDP has clearly gone on to do well for himself outside of wrestling, positively inspiring change in thousands of people through his rehabilitative yoga programs and also being inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame. But even he has gone on the record saying how disappointing some of the things he experienced in WWE were. WWE, in the eyes of some, retrospectively, has also treated some of their own in-house talent negatively, especially on their way out of the company. Trish Stratus retired in the summer of 2006, but her fellow female WWE legend, Lita, found herself on the way out of the company not soon after. Trish Stratus got the hero's exit in her hometown of Toronto, winning the Women's Championship in what was expected to be her final match at the time. Lita, on the other hand, lost her title to Mickie James. Losing on the way out wasn't the problem, though. It was the humiliation she suffered afterward, with Crime Time coming out, revealing some of her lingerie and other personal items in front of millions of people, displaying her in a negative light while she's leaving the company. What would be the payoff of this? That wasn't clear. For someone who went through so much for the company and even endured a neck injury and became a trailblazer that set a path that would truly not be fulfilled until years later with the women's evolution, Lita really didn't get the send-off that she deserved, though she would be honored in the WWE Hall of Fame some years later. Ever since her real-life relationship with Edge became a public thing and it was a whole love triangle, she faced harassment reportedly from some people within the company, made enemies, and was constantly put in uncomfortable segments on television, but embraced those roles. It all seemed like anger was directed at her rather than Edge. You can't really say that that was a respectful way to end her time in WWE. Interpersonal relationships are also something that affects the on-screen careers of WWE superstars. Mickie James was on the rise to fame, and she was dating someone who was also in the WWE locker room, Kenny Dykstra. But his career would suffer a setback. He discovered that Mickie James was reportedly having a relationship outside of their relationship with John Cena. Given the two men's polar opposite positions on the WWE card, it is believed by him and maybe some others that he suffered when his relationship with Mickie James ended. Kenny Dykstra's career came to a halt, and his run with the Spirit Squad ended before he was sent back to WWE's developmental territory. Upon his return, he was featured on television but got relegated to lower card status on TV shows like Heat, lost all of his momentum before a brief storyline with Victoria was followed by his release from WWE. Many have argued that Dykstra had all the potential and a great look, and his potential was also wasted by this whole backstage power play that some objectively speculate upon. But it's just that. speculation. And then you have wrestlers, even at the top levels, who are just frustrated with how things played out on television and how that took a toll on their mind. Like Dean Ambrose, someone who's been extremely vocal about his frustrations with WWE and its work culture towards the end of his time there. EC3, who made his way up from WWE NXT to the main roster, was put in a challenging position to the point where Dean Ambrose, now known as Jon Moxley, said that he was set up to fail. Why would you set someone up to fail? Describing himself and WWE boss at the time, Vince McMahon, as Coke and Mentos together, the man now known as Jon Moxley in AEW slammed WWE's creative writing team at the time for taking away any creativity that he felt he had, and the producers for barring superstars from doing cool things in a match and depriving them of great stories. He said the work culture in WWE took away from his love and passion for wrestling, and that he had already mentally checked out over half a year before actually leaving. Moxley's case shows issues within the creative aspect of WWE at times, and how certain culture negatively affects those within all the different departments. Now, that clearly has changed over the past few years. At least that's what we see outside looking in. There's a pattern of toxic behavior, though, that has existed on the lower rungs of WWE's developmental system. Years ago, before WWE NXT became the AAA version of WWE, developing future WrestleMania main eventers, it was known as FCW, and former WCW superstar Bill DeMott was its head coach, and he butted heads with a lot of people. He left the company under some controversial circumstances through a wave of allegations of abuse, of cruel behavior during training sessions with potential future superstars. L.A. Knight shared years ago on an interview podcast with X-Pac that he did not get along with DeMott. Knight heard that DeMott expressed his hatred for Knight as a student, but would not work on the issue with him transparently. The now megastar of WWE alluded to the problem with DeMott, which occurred around 2013, being a contributing factor to his release from the company at that time. A former WWE writer, Brittany Abrahams, filed a racial discrimination lawsuit against WWE over what she described as a, quote, offensively racist and stereotypic jargon used in WWE scripts. She claims she was fired over taking a collector event chair, something that she claims her coworkers of other races did as well without facing similar consequences. She detailed the ludicrous storylines she was supposed to create involving superstars like Mansoor, Angel Garza, and Aaliyah. She complained about the exaggerated Nigerian accent that was scripted for Apollo Crews, and also stereotypical presentations of African-American superstars like Bianca Belair. The lawsuit named some pretty important people in WWE, but the same lawsuit reportedly was dropped in August of 2023. So up until now, we've essentially determined that there has been a great deal of toxic behavior within WWE. We'd normally end the video here, but there's still a lot more to talk about. Not all of the people we mentioned had their lives outright ruined, but their careers certainly had to deal with some unfortunate situations that were pitted against them. When Sportskeeda interviewed Nails, the former WWE superstar who literally strangled Vince McMahon over some disputed payout, he said that McMahon ruined so many careers and livelihoods because no one could speak up against him. After all, this is the man who had the power to make or break careers in the business. With the fallout of the recent allegations, many people aren't exactly going to have a hard time believing that sentiment. The sad reality is that pro wrestling as a whole is not simply just WWE. It is all naturally dangerous and a draining profession at any level, let alone the big leagues. There are people, a lot more people than we've discussed about here, that have also gone through a very, very tough time. All the politics really puts it into perspective how cutthroat the wrestling business really has been over the decades. Thankfully, a lot has changed in the last decade. What we know for sure however, is that a lot of the toxicity of wrestlers' court, backstage, policing, and overall locker room politicking seems to have dropped down to a large degree. The newer generation of stars seems to have cultivated a much more positive environment backstage that supports everyone rather than needing to, directly backstab one another to get ahead. Maybe you can thank guys like Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins for that. And WWE seems to have a more inclusive culture. WWE is and will always be competitive, and it should be, but there seems to be a much healthier type of competition now. It appears that the creative process has been streamlined and improved in some way under the leadership of Triple H, who took over in the summer of 2022, and the product we've seen on television since gives us hope that the creative process is cleaner for the talent to be able to perform in. The allegations against Vince McMahon certainly shook things up in a big way, and TKO has responded quickly by having him resign from his position as executive chairman of the company. To many, this is the first big step, and fans are hoping that TKO will make an effort to weed out everyone associated with that type of behavior from, for lack of a better term, the old ways. Some of the big contributors to the overall systemic change could be the fact that the current generation of wrestling talent, and that includes talent off camera, actually grew up as wrestling fans and got to see firsthand the lifestyle that led to many of their heroes suffering so much pain in and out of the ring, and in some cases premature death. The entire culture on wrestling has focused in a completely different way. Late nights, long roads, lots of drinking, and reported drug use are not the norm you hear about in wrestling circles anymore. From a corporate standpoint, the need for good PR increased significantly for WWE since they went PG, but they've certainly evolved a lot more than just seeking good PR. They don't want to lose the lucrative sponsorships and broadcast revenue, but also people should live a better life within wrestling. And in reality, a lot of this has changed because there is a change of times in culture overall. This isn't to say that WWE is suddenly a zero negativity. No, that's going to be a part of what they do for their talent every single day, and some of that is just natural, like the sun rising. But it's safe to assume that the current state of affairs has left them in possibly a healthier state than they may have been even just a few years ago. Within the locker room, within circles of talent, both on and off camera, there has been a genuine effort to change things. Thank you for watching.